Greetings, my fellow Americans. Tonight I would like to talk to you on the subject of presumed guilt. And by presumed guilt, I'm talking about the warped perception of the adage, innocent until proven guilty. It's supposed to be a founding principle of our law and order system. But in our country, that's not what's happening. It's certainly not happening here in Kalispell, Montana. The presumption is guilt first, just because of the accusation. No proof needed, no anything. Whenever I bring up my story and I try to explain it to people, and I say I went to jail, went to prison for 5 years, the immediate response, what did you do? Or if someone else is trying to explain my story to someone, to explain why they're supporting me, why they're on my side, try to rally support behind my cause, the question is, what did he do? The presumption of guilt is inherent in that question. It's not saying what happened to him. It didn't say why was he arrested. What did he do? And more accurate, what crime did he commit? What did he do to be thrown in jail? In my case, I sued Kalispell. I sued a group of people that were clearly acting outside of law, and they didn't want to be held accountable for it. So they threw me in jail. I didn't commit a crime. And actually what I was doing was actually protected by the Constitution that says that I have the right to pursue grievances against government without fear of molestation. Now, molestation in this case is dealing with subjects of harassment, attacks of any kind. They can't come and throw you in jail for suing them. But guess what? That's exactly what they did here. They made up a charge, threw me in jail, and then subsequently prison, and now under 15 years of probation, under constant threat of being thrown back in prison, all because I sued them. I brought grievance against government, and I should have been allowed to do so without fear of retaliation. That's exactly what was done to me. So, but this is the kind of thing that's the bread and butter of corrupt organizations. You have a general public that believes whatever they're told about people who are accused. You go to jail, well, he must have had a reason to go to jail. He must have done something. Not why did he go to jail? What did he do to go to jail? What crime did he commit to go to jail? Not what's the reason he's in jail. The latter would be more of an actual question. The former is more of of a belief, an inherent underlying belief that a crime was committed to put him in jail, or her in jail. And the more nefarious the accusation, the more believable it is. If you accuse somebody of murder, the general public is going to believe it, be more likely to believe it than, oh, he shoplifted. The more nefarious, the easier it is to believe. I've always said that if you want to hide a political prisoner, accuse him of being a sex offender, because then no one will listen. And that's the absolute truth. When I was actually attacking Frank Garner's original campaign back in 2014, and I was exposing all this information, I was sharing all my documents, and I actually published my book, my nice thick book with all the scanned copies and documentation inside of it that invariably proved beyond a shadow of a doubt that this was a setup. It's just irrefutable. When you look at the evidence, when you look at the material in that book, it's irrefutable. Half a dozen websites, I imagine some of them are probably even still up, immediately came after me and said, don't listen to Mr. Glick, he's just a sex offender. It doesn't matter whether I'm telling you what I'm saying, how it happened, the documents I produce, the testimony I present. Nobody ever questions whether Frank Garner did anything wrong. The immediate presumption is, don't listen to Mr. Glick, he's a sex offender. There's a movie called Enemy of the State, and it stars Gene Hackman and Will Smith. And there's a particular scene in there that always comes to mind. And again, it's been years since I've seen the movie, so you'll have to forgive that my recollection was a little spotty. But the general idea is that Will Smith is framed for murder. Someone is a girl close to him whom he had an affair with at one point in the past, but still has remained a friend of his, is murdered. The authorities place his clothing and everything around the apartment, frame him for the murder. And he's asking Gene Hackman's character, why have they done this? Why would they accuse me of this? Why would they kill her? And Gene Hackman says, it's not about you. It's not about her. it's about, first of all, if they frame you for murder or a nefarious crime of some kind, it turns the public against you, and then the public is helping the law enforcement. They're helping. There's no allies in the public because the public has heard you're a murderer, and therefore they're out to help the law enforcement bring you in because you're a danger, you're a risk, you're a criminal. Now, again, just as with that movie, you know, Will Smith was not actually guilty. He was only accused. He never faced trial, never faced anything. Just the information is put out there. There's now a manhunt for somebody who supposedly committed a murder, and the general public believes it. But the second thing, and the more important, I think, of the thing that Gene Hackman brought up in that scene, is that he says they're doing this because if you ever try to speak out against them, the accusation discredits you. And that's 100% true. Just as I mentioned with my issue where I try to bring up any type of allegation, any kind of information, they just simply throw out, he's a sex offender, we don't have to listen to him. When I'm bringing up credible and detailed and chronicled records that demonstrate irrefutable evidence that Frank Garner's involved in a massive cover-up and in a massive effort to try to frame me for a crime he knows I did not commit, to protect his department from a lawsuit. No one talks about that. Nobody addresses those. Nobody tries to question whether or not what the information I have is true. The immediate response across a half dozen websites is, don't listen to Mr. Glick, he's a sex offender. Write me off. Once again, want to hide a sex offender or hide a political prisoner, call him a sex offender, because a sex offender is never listened to. Nobody listens to him. Nobody wants to listen to them. So the consequence is, here we are. We have a person, we accuse him, now the public will believe. And of course, this is even more so here in Flathead County. The Flathead County authorities control the media. They have their thumb on it. They absolutely do. When someone is arrested and accused of a crime, let's go back to our Jim Bob example. Jim Bob is accused of murdering his wife. The authorities issue a statement to the local newspaper. They make no effort to corroborate the details. They make no effort to fact check it against Jim Bob, make no effort to contact Jim Bob, make no effort to contact Jim Bob's lawyer, get an official statement. They simply print the information that is given to them by the law enforcement. And why would that be? When I actually first filed my lawsuit against the city of Kalispell, I was reaching out to local newspapers, television stations, everything else, trying to get publicity behind the lawsuit. Because at the time I believed that the more information I got out there in the general public, the more people would, the harder it would be for Kalispell to hide from what they had done and how they conducted themselves, the misconduct they had conducted. I managed to speak to a reporter by the name of Phil Buck. And I have no idea whether Phil Buck will corroborate this story or not. I'm telling you it's true, and I'm giving you his name because I had this conversation with him. He was first very interested in the story. I spoke with him the day after I filed the lawsuit, as I recall, and he was immediately all over it. Ron, I'm really excited about this. You've got this lawsuit. You have all these laws. I want to sit down with you, and I want to interview you, and I want to get these details. I want to get this evidence from you, and we'll set it up. I'm going to talk to my bosses about running this story. Didn't hear from about 3 or 4 days. In that time, they came and abducted my stepdaughters. They took them into custody, terrorized them, cut them off completely from family. Again, I don't want to go too far aside in rehashing those details. Again, they're in my book. So by all means, please do take the time to read my book, U.S. Political Prisoners since 2004. It's available on Amazon. But you can, when you sit the situation and they've taken my daughters and they've taken them, and so I'm in a panic and I'm calling Phil Buck and I'm saying, Phil, I really need you to call me back. This just went, so far beyond what we originally talked about. Up to that point, I've been taking my stepdaughters. There'd been some minor fear, some minor concern, but mostly my feeling was that I didn't commit a crime. How are they going to convict me of a crime that they don't want to commit? They're going to throw me in jail. They're going to realize they can't convict me because this crime didn't occur. I'm going to be exonerated, and they're going to have a lawsuit on their hands. They already have a lawsuit on their hands. Why would they want more? They're not going to compound this issue. I was naive. What can I say? But after they took my stepdaughters, And just as a quick aside, because I know I'm going to be attacked for this, I call them my stepdaughters because I raised them for 2.5 years, and I consider them my daughters. And I referred to them at the time as the time of my stepdaughters. I still, in my heart, see them as my stepdaughters because my perception of who they were in my life has not changed. They are not currently my stepdaughters. At the time this all happened, I consider them my stepdaughters, even though their mother and I were not married. So forgive the reference. It is how I feel about it. It's a personal bias, a personal perception, and it's just simply how I refer to the girls as my stepdaughters. But that said, Phil Buck gets back in touch with me, and he says, Ron, I'm sorry to tell you, I took this story to my bosses in Missoula, and they said no. They turned it down. They said, when it comes to the city of Kalispell or Flathead County government, it's hands off. You can't run any negative stories against them. He wasn't given a reason. At least he didn't tell me a reason. He just said they're hands off. You can't run any negative story against Kalispell or Flathead County governments. That's why the media doesn't do fact checks. That's why the media doesn't contact Jim Bob, never contacted me, never made an effort to get my side of the story, other than what I was trying to get out before I was arrested. Never try to fact check because they only run the information provided them by the government. They are a government funnel. They are not free. It's not a free press here. This press is run by the government. So when in the fictional Jim Bob, he goes to jail under an exceptionally high bond he presumably can't get out from under. He's locked in a jail cell, has no contact with the rest of the world, has no ability to get his story out or his version of events out. No internet access, by the way. If anybody who believes there's internet inside of a jail, they're wrong. The idea of sneaking cell phones into a jail is ludicrous. It might happen, but it doesn't happen nearly as often as the movies and TV shows make you think it happens. But you're not getting calls out. You're certainly not talking to media. You're certainly not getting your information out to the general public. You're cut off. And the government runs it. They funnel their information to the media who's under their thumb and only run the stories they approve. And people believe it. And it's conditioned the public to believe that if you're in jail, you're there for a reason. You committed a crime. What did he do? The presumption here is that the concept of innocent until proven guilty is completely undone by this. There is no meaning of guilt. There's no way to take, if guilt is presumed and no proof is needed, there cannot be an innocent until proven guilty, because you're guilty based upon presumption, based upon a biased perception that's controlled completely by the prosecutors, who may or may not have their own motivations. And this takes another turn when authorities simply create the script and they have their own underlying motive for doing so. As in my circumstance, they wanted to stop my lawsuit. In the case of Jim Bob, he had a cornerstone property. He had something they wanted. So they threw him in jail to get it away from him. If there's an underlying reason or underlying motivation, you're not going to have justice. You're going to have people who are willing to lie and willing to manipulate. A perfect example of this, and I'm going to talk about a case here in Montana, Berry Beach. You're able to look that up if you want. It's a pretty common case. Got a lot of publicity on Dateline quite a few years ago. Basically, the idea that Berry Beach was a 17-year-old, and just for all disclaimer purposes, I have met Berry Beach. I have talked with Berry Beach. I think Berry Beach is a pretty decent guy. He wasn't a friend of mine in prison. He wasn't someone I hung out with. I knew him. I was in circles around him. I've heard his story relayed from him in various contexts. He's never actually sat down to me and explained his story. I've always just overheard it in the course of moving around in the circles of people that he was around, because we were in Montana State Prison at the same time. But that said, Marc Roscoe was a local county attorney in Poplar, Montana. And this case was how he made his career. He went on to become state attorney general. and then went on to become the state governor, and then went on to become a very high paid lobbyist in Washington, D.C., where I believe he is to this day. But in 1979, when this murder occurred, Kimberly Neese was found dead in a river in Poplar, or outside Poplar, Montana. Beach was questioned at the time. He was 17 years old, and they didn't hold him or anything. There was absolutely no evidence tying him to the scene, no evidence at all. There was half a dozen fingerprints, palm prints, um, equal number of footprints, both bare and sandaled. None of them were berries. None of them were at all berries. So there was absolutely nothing tying into the scene. He moved to Louisiana and to be with his dad after the murder occurred. And the Louisiana sheriff apparently learned through some method, some means, that Barry had been questioned in the murder case of Kimberly Neese in Montana. Well, there were 3 unsolved murders in his local jurisdiction, and he took Barry in, questioned him, spent hours with him apparently, and coerced a confession in which Barry confessed to killing the 3 local murders in Louisiana and Kimberly Neese. Problem was, Barry wasn't even in the state when the 3 murders in Louisiana happened. He just wasn't even in the state, so he couldn't have. And eventually they found the other people responsible for those murders. Barry Beach had nothing to do with the Louisiana murders. As for the Kimberly Neese case, he got no details right. He didn't describe her outfit right. He didn't describe how she was dragged to the river right. He didn't describe anything right. He had no accurate details of the crime. He just told a story that he thought the sheriff would believe. Now, Barry's, and I believe, and keep in mind, I've talked to literally dozens of people in Montana State Prison where I was helping people with their legal cases and whatnot. So I've heard a lot of different versions of a lot of different situations, circumstances. But as I recall, Barry's story was that the sheriff in Louisiana, the deputy, took a bunch of pictures of people who had gone through electrocution, who had died in the electric chair, and told Barry at age 17 that he was going to be convicted of murder, and the only thing keeping him from being fried and going through this insufferable pain and torture of electrocution was to confess. He could either spend his life in prison or he could be electrocuted in the chair, and it all depended upon whether he confessed to his crimes. Now remember, Barry had been accused of 4 murders. He had confessed to 4 murders. 3 of those murders, the vast majority of those murders of which his confession included, occurred before he ever even stepped foot into Louisiana. So there's no way that the confession in and of itself should have been in any way, shape, or form considered to be reliable or dependable. But then when he got to the Kimberly Neese details, he got them all wrong. He got all the details wrong. Remember, there was plenty of evidence at the scene. There were plenty of footprints, sandaled, barefoot. There were plenty of handprints, fingerprints, all over Kim Neese's vehicle. None of them were Barry's. It wasn't like Barry went through and swept all these. Oh, by the way, interestingly enough, he did claim he wiped the truck down of any prints, and that's why his prints were not found at the scene. Remember, there's half a dozen prints there, including a bloody handprint on the outside of the truck, which the FBI and the police both determined had to have been left by the murderer. It wasn't Kim Neese's handprint. It wasn't Barry's handprint. It had to have been the murderer, because it was Kim Neese's blood. The handprint was on the side of the truck, so clearly it was after she had been hurt. Either she was dead at that point or she was in the process of dying. The handprint was put on the vehicle by a person who had handled her blood, and it wasn't Barry. Very important fact there. But when Roscoe went to trial, he lied. He lied to the jury. He told the jury that the print on the side of the vehicle was Kim Neese's. It wasn't. He claimed that, all these inconsistencies were explainable away and lied about the evidence presented, lied about the facts that were there, told the jury all these other details that didn't exist. He didn't care that he was lying. He knew he was lying. He knew it. He knew beyond a shadow of a doubt he was lying. There was no question in his mind that he was lying to the jury. He was perjuring himself before the jury. Now, yeah, I know. Before anybody tries to catch me on this, technically perjury is a lie under oath. And technically, a prosecuting attorney or a defense attorney are not actually under oath. They're not swearing to tell the truth. They're allowed to lie, to manipulate. But when you're lying on behalf of the state of Montana, when you're lying on behalf of the government that's supposed to be in pursuit of justice, and you have no qualms lying to a jury about the facts of a case, there's a real problem there. And it undermines the context of the integrity of the office. Because again, the general public is perceiving the integrity of the office when they believe these statements, not the integrity of the individual holding that office. In this case, Roscoe clearly had no integrity. He had no problem lying to a jury. He had no problems making up evidence, lying about what evidence was present, just to get his conviction. Then Barry went to prison for life. He didn't get out until 2015. Well, there was a time in which his conviction was briefly overturned. He was ordered a new trial. The Montana Supreme Court determined that, ordered him back, threw that out and sent him back to prison. It's a mess. But at the end of the day, he didn't get released. He didn't get his sentence commuted. He was not exonerated. He was not granted a pardon. He was not given clemency. His sentence was commuted, which meant that it basically got reduced from life in prison without chance of parole to time served plus 10 years probation. In 2025, assuming Beach remains law-abiding, remains out there in good conduct and good faith, in 2025, he may yet be a free man. But he'll be going around the rest of his life with a conviction of a crime he most clearly did not commit. No person who looks at the evidence of the scene and looks at the coerced testimony of Barry Beach can possibly look at it and say, oh yeah, this guy's guilty. Especially when there's a gang of girls running around Poplar admitting to the crime in the weeks following the murder. They were ignored. Nobody paid attention to that because they wanted Barry. Marc Roscoe wanted the white guy put in front of a jury. Let's accuse him of this crime. Let's put him in prison, and I'm going to make a career off this. I'm going to use this conviction and the jacket I'm creating by the murder conviction to pursue higher ambitions. He ran for state attorney general. He got it. He ran for governor. He got it. His clout in all of this earned him the perks of being a high-paid lobbyist in Washington, D.C. All he had to do was ruin a perfectly innocent kid's life. Obliterated it. No concern. So, Barry Beach. Barry, why are you in jail? Why are you in prison? What did you do? Barry did nothing. He knew her. He was neighbors with her. He didn't murder her. If he did, he's the most successful murder suspect in the world because he knew how to erase only his own fingerprints and only his own footprints from the crime scene. Left everybody else's, but knew somehow how to remove only his own. Only his own. Leaving absolutely no trace that he was ever there. What a perfect crime. Why would he confess to it if he was that much of a mastermind? Why would he confess and get all the details wrong? The insanity of it. But the prospect here is what I'm talking about, the presumption of guilt. There's still people out here wandering around who really have not taken the time to examine this case. Barry was accused of murder. Barry went to prison. Barry must be guilty. So, it is what it is. It's not what it is, but it is how it turned out. And an innocent man went to prison. Prosecutors use these trumped up cases to build their own reputation. And the public buys it. They buy into it. Whether it's because, like in Flathead, they control the media, or it's just The public is just so conditioned into hearing of criminal misbehavior, they just believe it. When I was running my youth recreations program, and I freely admit I used to say this. I actually used to say this. Where there's smoke, there must be fire. There wouldn't be an accusation of child abuse if one had not occurred. Children don't make up these things. I used to say these things. I ran a youth recreations program and I defended children. I was an advocate for children. I spoke up for them. I defended them. Now I question my conduct over the years because I took it at base value that children don't lie about these kinds of things. They do. They can be manipulated into it. And let's face it, there are children out there who are just wicked kids. Not saying all children are wicked, but there's wicked human beings. And they don't always just turn 18 and suddenly become wicked. They start young. They start with misbehavior and misconduct as children. Psychopaths don't suddenly, at the age of 18, lose all emotional capacity to tell the truth or have any, empathy for anybody else. They grow up with that. It's part of their upbringing. So there are actually wicked children out there. There are children who lie. There are children who deceive. And then there are those who are manipulated and scared and terrified, like Barry. There are people out there in the world they know how to intimidate, they know how to threaten, and they know how to use power. Undue influence is what it's called under the law, to actually take these children and terrorize them. Whether it be to confess to a crime they didn't commit because they're terrified of being electrocuted and burned alive, or you can never go home unless you say this about this because that's the only way you're ever going to see your mom again. When you can sit there and terrorize children, play off their ignorance, play off of their immature capacity to understand what's going on, it's not fair. And then when you take the person who's accused and lock them in a hole and leave them there without any ability to defend themselves, oh yeah, they get to defend themselves 6, 9, 12 months later perhaps. Meanwhile, the prosecutors and the police are out there making their case to the general public using the media the whole time. So there is no real fair foundation here. This is all about let's line them up and roll them out. This is a factory. It truly is. As a society, we need a paradigm shift. We've already had this massive shift the other direction, away from the concept of innocent until proven guilty. As I said, if guilt is presumed and you don't need evidence or proof, then the concept of proven until proven guilty is out the window. They're not innocent anymore. They're guilty. Why are we even holding trials? If everyone just believes they're guilty, if the prosecutors are just going to be able to railroad people into believing whatever they want them to believe, if they're going to be believed just for the sake of the office they hold and no effort whatsoever to hold them accountable. And believe me, and understand this principle, people who are elected to these offices are not elected because they are the best person for the job. There is no pre-screening, there is no interview process, there is no test. It's a popularity contest. The prosecutor gets to be prosecutor because they are the most popular person to run for that office. It doesn't matter whether he's a good prosecutor, or he's a capable prosecutor, whether it be governor, congressman, president. If you just because you're popular doesn't mean you're good. Doesn't mean you're competent, and it doesn't mean that you have the interest of justice or the people's best interest in mind when you take that oath of office. We need a paradigm shift. We need to get away from the idea that authority has automatic, integrity, and shift it back to the people. We can't have our faith in a government system purely on the basis of the fact they are the government. We have to understand that people run this government and people are flawed and people are corrupt. And when you have a corrupt organization, whether it be systemic racism or it be a motivation to protect yourself from your own misconduct, whether it be because you're running drug cartels or you're running firearms or you're molesting children or whatever, and you commit the crimes and you don't want to be held accountable, so you ruin someone else's life, or you just have political ambitions and ideals and you want to go to a higher office and you don't have any problems with destroying someone's life to do it, We can't have a society anymore that works off presumed guilt. So the next time you see somebody who's in jail, don't say, what did they do? Why are they there? Ask the right questions. Because asking the right questions are the only way we're ever going to get anywhere. Because if we're just assuming without asking questions, we're no longer innocent until proven guilty. We're guilty automatically, and there's no proving necessary. So upon that note, I'm going to say adieu. Hopefully the technical glitches in this video are overlooked, because I've been having some today. But I really appreciate your time. As a reminder, please keep in mind to go to monspiracy.podbean.com. That's our home base for this podcast. If you're watching this on YouTube, please follow. Please share the videos. The higher number of followers I get on both Podbean and YouTube, the better the odds of being raised in random circulation, the more exposure my videos and information get. If you like what I'm saying, if you want to encourage, if you want to help support us, my information is on Podbean, and where you can send material and physical donations. Anyone who's incarcerated or under supervised authority, Bill's contact information is there for you to reach out and talk to him, and hopefully get this information relayed to me. If you have any questions, any suggestions for future podcasts, I strongly encourage you to reach out. I want to hear from you. The one thing I don't want, and what I will screen against, is people who simply come on here to attack viciously, make threats, intimidate, harass, terrorize anyone, whether it be myself or anyone else. So please keep that in mind. I hope you'll recommend these videos and help support our cause. Thank you, and I hope above all else that you stay safe, and whenever possible, stay free. Thank you. Good night.